There is something happening in your body right now that you have not been paying attention to. Not a symptom, not a sensation you need to fix, or a signal you need to interpret. Something more fundamental than that. Something that has been running beneath every decision you've made about your health, your energy, your age. A process so constant, so embedded in the architecture of who you think you are, that you stopped seeing it the moment it became familiar. And here's the thing about familiar things. They don't disappear when you stop watching them. They accelerate. This is not a video about aging gracefully. This is not a conversation about supplements or routines or the latest protocol that promises to turn back the clock. You've seen those, you probably tried some of them. And something in you already knows that what you're looking for isn't in a bottle or a biohack or a morning ritual someone else designed. What you're looking for is a different kind of seeing. Because here is what no one tells you about the body. It is not a machine running down. It is a quantum probability field responding to the quality of your observation. Every cell in your body is listening, not to your intentions, not to your affirmations, not to what you wish were true, but to what you actually see when you look at yourself, what you actually believe when no one is performing for, what signal you are broadcasting at the level of attention itself. And most people have been broadcasting the same signal for decades. The signal that says, this is who I am, this is how I age, this is the body I inherited, the timeline I'm on, the decline that is coming whether I want it or not. That signal is not the truth. It is an observation that became a belief, that became a biological instruction. And today you are going to see that instruction clearly for the first time. There is a book, not a metaphor for a book. An actual text, a convergence of cellular biology, quantum physics, epigenetics, and the ancient science of consciousness that has been finding its way to specific people at specific moments in their lives. Not when they're looking for it, when they are ready. When something in the body has already begun to shift and is waiting for the mind to catch up. If you are here right now, something in you already knows this is not an accident. The title of this transmission is not a marketing line. It is a quantum observation. Books like this don't find everyone. They find the ones whose biology has already begun to ask the question. And the question is not, how do I slow down aging? The question, the real question, the one your cells have been asking in the dark, is this. What if age is not a sentence? What if it is a story? And what if the moment you stop telling it the way you've been telling it, the body stops living it the way it's been living it? Watch what happens when you sit with that. Don't rush past it. Let it land somewhere specific. Because what we are about to explore together is not philosophy dressed up as science. It is not wishful thinking with footnotes. It is the documented, measurable, reproducible reality that the human body is not on a fixed timeline. And the primary variable that determines how it ages is not genetics, not diet, not exercise, not sleep, though all of those matter. The primary variable is observation. Specifically, what the consciousness inhabiting the body sees when it looks at the body, what story it tells, what signal it sends, what it believes is possible at the level of cellular instruction. This is where it gets precise. The human body replaces approximately 330 billion cells every single day. That number is not a metaphor. 330 billion every day. The skin you are wearing right now is not the skin you wore 7 years ago. The liver processing your last meal is not the liver that processed your first. Even the bones that feel like permanent architecture, they are rebuilt completely every decade. You are not a fixed structure. You are a constant process of becoming. And here is what the science of epigenetics has confirmed in the last 2 decades. The instructions that tell those 330 billion new cells what to become, how to function, how quickly to decline. Those instructions are not locked in your DNA. They are written in real time by the signals your environment sends to your genes. And the most powerful environmental signal your cells receive is not the food you eat or the air you breathe, though those matter. The most powerful signal is the biochemistry of your internal state. Your stress hormones, your inflammatory markers, the neurochemical signature of what you believe about yourself. In other words, what you think you are, your cells are told to become. Look closer. This is not metaphysics. This is the mechanism. The field of epigenetics, which has produced Nobel Prize-winning research, which is now the foundation of cutting-edge oncology and regenerative medicine, has demonstrated with measurable precision that gene expression is not fixed, that the same genome can express youth or age, resilience or decline, regeneration or deterioration, based on the signals it receives from the consciousness that inhabits it. And the consciousness that inhabits your body has been telling it a very specific story. You learned that story from watching others age. You inherited it from a culture that treats decline as inevitable and youth as something to be mourned as it passes. You absorbed it through every mirror that showed you something you labeled as loss. Every morning you woke up and cataloged what hurt, what sagged, what slowed. Every time you said, out loud or silently, "I'm not as young as I used to be," your body received that as instruction, not as complaint, as instruction. Because your cells don't distinguish between what you wish were true and what you observe as true. They respond to the signal. And the signal you've been sending consistently for years is, "We are in decline. Adjust accordingly." And they have. But here's what the book reveals. Here's the layer underneath everything you've been told about aging. And this is the thing you have been avoiding looking at. Not because it's painful, but because it is so profoundly liberating that seeing it clearly would make it impossible to keep living the way you've been living. The body can receive a different signal at any age, at any stage, not as a desperate override, not as a frantic correction, but as a genuine shift in the quality of observation, a real change in what the consciousness sees when it looks at the body. And when that shift happens, when the observer changes what it observes, the biology follows. This has been documented in clinical settings, in controlled studies, in populations of people who, by every external measure, should have continued to decline and instead reversed measurable biological markers of age. Not slowed them, reversed them. Telomere length increasing, inflammatory markers dropping, cellular regeneration accelerating, cognitive function improving, not because of a drug, not because of a protocol, because something changed in the way they were watching themselves. Sit with that for a moment. Don't rush past what you just saw. If this kind of seeing is landing for you, subscribe and like this video. It helps more people find what you just found. And we are going to keep going much deeper. Now let me show you something. Let me take you somewhere specific so this principle stops being abstract and becomes something you can feel in your own architecture. There was a woman named Marin. She was 63 years old. Though she would have told you she felt closer to 78, she had spent the last 15 years in what she privately called the long goodbye, the slow, steady accumulation of evidence that her best years were behind her. A knee that ached when the weather changed. Energy that peaked at 10 in the morning and disappeared by 2 in the afternoon. A face in the mirror that she recognized but didn't quite claim. She wasn't depressed exactly. She was resigned, and resignation, she had decided, was what wisdom looked like when you stopped pretending. She had read the books, she had done the protocols, she had tried the diets, the supplements, the early mornings, the cold plunges, the yoga classes, the meditation apps. And some of them helped briefly at the surface, but something always pulled her back. Some gravitational force she couldn't name kept returning her to the same baseline, the sense that this was who she was now. This was the body she had. This was the aging she had earned. One afternoon, sitting in a library, not looking for anything specifically, a book fell from a shelf. Not metaphorically, literally fell. She looked at the cover and felt something she couldn't explain. Not excitement, something quieter than that. Recognition. The way you feel when you see a word for something you've experienced your whole life but never had language for. She took it home. She didn't read it so much as she was read by it. Because the book wasn't telling her what to do, it was showing her what she had been doing. It was holding up a mirror to the quality of attention she had been directing at her own body. And what she saw in that mirror stopped her cold. She had been watching herself age, every day, consistently, with the full force of her attention. She had been a faithful, devoted, meticulous observer of her own decline, and in doing so, she had been issuing the most precise biological instructions imaginable. Not from her mind exactly, from her observation. From the quality of the gaze she turned on herself every morning, every afternoon, every time she caught her reflection or felt a new ache or noticed something that confirmed what she already believed. The book showed her this, not as an accusation, as a revelation, as the thing that had been running her reality from beneath the surface, invisible precisely because it was so constant. And here's what Marin did next, not what the book told her to do, what she found herself doing naturally in the days after reading it. She started watching differently, not trying to see something different, not forcing optimism or practicing gratitude or telling herself a better story. Watching differently. Turning the quality of her attention from observation as confirmation to observation as curiosity. Looking at her body not as evidence of a verdict already rendered, but as a process still in motion. A quantum field still collapsing into form, a story still being written. She would look at her hands in the morning, the same hands she had cataloged for years as evidence of age. And instead of confirming what she already believed, she would simply watch, without interpretation, without the story, just the hands, the extraordinary, improbable, constantly regenerating miracle of the hands. And something began to shift, not overnight, not dramatically, but measurably, verifiably. The knee that had ached for 15 years began to quiet. The energy that had peaked at 10 and vanished by 2 began to extend. The face in the mirror began to look less like a document of time passing and more like a face, complex, alive, still becoming. Her doctor, at her annual physical 8 months later, asked what she had changed. Her blood work looked different. Her inflammatory markers were down. Her cellular age, measured by telomere analysis, had moved in a direction her doctor described as unusual. Marin said, "I changed how I was watching." Her doctor wrote it off as lifestyle changes she wasn't reporting accurately. But Marin knew. She had read the book. She understood the mechanism. She had stopped being an observer of her own decline and become an observer of her own becoming. And her biology, her 330 billion new cells per day, each one receiving the signal of her attention, had responded accordingly. And you have been both Marin in the library and the book on the shelf. You have been the one who looks and the one who looks away. But today you chose to look. Now let's go deeper into what you're actually seeing, because the Marin story is not an anomaly. It is a demonstration of a principle that is so well documented in the scientific literature that the only reason it hasn't become the foundation of mainstream medicine is that it threatens a model of the body that is enormously profitable to maintain. The model that says the body is a machine, that aging is a program, that your biology is your destiny, fixed in your genome, inevitable in its trajectory, manageable at best, reversible only through pharmaceutical intervention. That model is not wrong because it is evil. It is wrong because it is incomplete. And the incompleteness is not an accident. Here's what the complete picture looks like. In 1979, a Harvard psychologist named Ellen Langer conducted what would become one of the most quietly revolutionary experiments in the history of consciousness research. She took a group of men in their late 70s and early 80s, and men with the full suite of age-related physical decline you would expect, and she didn't give them supplements. She didn't give them exercise protocols. She gave them a different observation. She brought them to a retreat center that had been designed to look exactly like 1959. The furniture, the magazines, the music, the television programs, everything was from 20 years earlier. And she didn't ask them to pretend to be younger. She asked them to inhabit the world as it was in 1959. To talk about current events as if they were current. To discuss their lives as if they were living them then, not remembering them now. In 5 days, measurable physical changes occurred. Vision improved, hearing improved, manual dexterity improved, posture improved, scores on cognitive tests improved. Independent judges, shown photographs taken before and after the experiment, rated the men as looking measurably younger. Not slightly, measurably. Nothing changed in their bodies except what they were observing. What they were telling their cells about what time it was. What signal their consciousness was sending about who they were and what was possible. 5 days. Measurable reversal of biological age markers. No drugs, no protocols, a different quality of observation. This is not what you think it is. This is not a feel-good story about the power of positive thinking. This is a controlled scientific demonstration that the body's aging process is not a fixed program but a responsive system. A system that listens, that adjusts, that takes its cues from the consciousness that inhabits it. A system that can be redirected not through force, but through the quality of attention it receives. Ellen Langer called this mindfulness, but she meant something more precise than what that word has come to mean in the wellness industry. She meant the act of noticing, the act of looking at familiar things as if for the first time. the act of refusing to let the story you've been telling about something substitute for direct observation of what is actually there. Because here is what happens when you stop observing and start confirming. You stop seeing what is actually there and start seeing what you expect to see. And your body, receiving the signal of your expectations, obliges. The quantum mechanics of this are not metaphorical, they are literal. In quantum physics, the observer effect is not a philosophical curiosity. It is a foundational principle of how reality works at the subatomic level. The act of observation, the interaction between a measuring instrument and a quantum system, literally determines which of the system's possible states becomes actual. Before observation, a particle exists in a superposition of all possible states simultaneously. The moment it is observed, it collapses into one specific state. Your cells are not subatomic particles, but they are governed by subatomic processes. Every chemical reaction in your body, every protein fold, every genetic expression, these are quantum events. And the consciousness that observes them is not a passive bystander. It is an active participant in determining which of the available states they collapse into. This is not poetry. This is the frontier of quantum biology, a field that has emerged in the last 2 decades at the intersection of quantum physics and cellular biology, producing research that is as rigorously documented as it is paradigm-shattering. Quantum tunneling in enzyme reactions, quantum coherence in photosynthesis, quantum effects in olfactory reception, in avian navigation, in the very mechanism by which DNA replicates. Life, at its most fundamental level, is a quantum process, and quantum processes respond to observation. What you observe, you change. That's not belief. That's quantum mechanics. Now here's the layer underneath that. If the body is a quantum system responding to the quality of observation it receives, then the question is not, what should I do to reverse my age? The question is, what am I currently observing? What signals my attention sending right now in this moment to the 330 billion cells that are taking their instructions from my consciousness? And the honest answer for most people is this: a story of decline, a narrative of loss, a confirmation loop that began the first time they saw something in the mirror that they labeled as aging and has been running with increasing specificity and conviction ever since. Let's look at that loop directly, because this is the thing you've been avoiding seeing, not because it's painful, but because seeing it clearly means you can't pretend it isn't there anymore. And pretending it isn't there has been very comfortable. The loop works like this. You observe something, a gray hair, a line on your face, a joint that aches, an energy level that doesn't match what you remember. You interpret that observation through the framework you've inherited. Aging is decline, and this is evidence of it. You feel something. Resignation, perhaps, or a kind of low-level grief. That feeling generates a biochemical signature, say, specific stress hormones, specific inflammatory compounds, specific neurochemical patterns. Those compounds reach your cells. Your cells receive them as signal. Your genes, in response to that signal, express in ways that confirm the story. More gray hairs, more lines, more ache, more fatigue. And you observe that, and the loop continues. This is not a metaphor for a process. This is the process, documented, measurable. The confirmation loop of biological aging, is driven not primarily by time, but by the quality of observation that consciousness brings to the body over time. And here's what that means. The loop can be interrupted, not by ignoring what you see, not by pretending the gray hair isn't gray or the ache doesn't ache, but by changing the quality of the observation itself. By bringing to the body a different kind of seeing, not the seeing that confirms a story, but the seeing that watches what is actually there. Pause here. This is not a thought exercise. This is an observation. I want you to do something right now, not later, not when you have more time, not when you're in a better mood for this kind of thing. Right now. Bring your attention to your body, not to the story about your body, to the body itself. Start with your hands if you can see them. Look at them as if you have never seen them before. Not as evidence of age, not as evidence of youth, as objects of pure observation. Notice the texture of the skin, the way the light falls on the knuckles, the extraordinary complexity of the architecture, the tendons visible beneath the surface, the way the fingers bend and flex with a precision that no human engineering has ever replicated. Now notice something else. Notice the aliveness, not as a concept, as a direct perception. There is something happening in your hands right now that is not mechanical. There is warmth, there is pulse, there is the constant, unceasing activity of cellular regeneration. Billions of processes occurring simultaneously, each one so complex that the most powerful computers ever built cannot fully model it. And all of it happening without your direction, without your permission, without your awareness. Your body is not declining. Your body is constantly, furiously, magnificently becoming. The story of decline is the story you've been telling about a process you haven't been watching clearly. Now watch what happens in your body when you hear this, not what you think about it. What happens in your body? Is there a release somewhere? A softening? A quality of recognition that feels different from intellectual agreement? That response, that somatic shift, is not nothing. That is your biology receiving a different signal. That is the beginning of a different instruction. Stay with it. And I want to ask you something here, because this field of observers is not passive. When you did that practice just now, when you looked at your hands without the story, what did you notice that surprised you? What was actually there that the confirmation loop had been editing out? Drop that in the comments. One word or everything you saw. Because naming it anchors it, and what you anchor, you can return to. Now let's go deeper. Because the book that finds you when your body is ready, and if you're here, your body is ready, doesn't just give you a different story to tell. It gives you a different instrument of observation. And the difference between those two things is the difference between self-help and genuine transformation. Most books about aging, about health, about the body give you a better story, a more optimistic narrative, a set of beliefs to replace the pessimistic ones, and that can help at the surface. But beliefs are still thoughts. They are still constructions. They are still one layer removed from direct observation. And the body doesn't respond to what you believe about it. It responds to what you actually see when you look at it. The shift that the book catalyzes, the shift that Marin experienced, that the men in Ellen Langer's experiment experienced, that thousands of people across documented clinical research have experienced, is not a belief change. It is an observation change, a shift in the quality of the gaze itself, from the gaze that confirms to the gaze that witnesses, From the eye that sees what it expects to the eye that sees what is actually there. And what is actually there, when you look without the story, is not what you've been told. What is actually there is a system of almost incomprehensible regenerative intelligence. A body that has survived everything you have put it through, that has healed wounds you forgot about, fought infections you never knew you had, repaired cellular damage you never noticed occurring. A body that, right now, is performing approximately 37 trillion individual cellular operations per second, and getting most of them right. That is not a body in decline. That is a body in constant, heroic, astonishing recovery and renewal. The decline you've been observing is real. But it is not the whole picture. It is the part of the picture you've been trained to see. And what you've been trained to see, you've been trained to amplify. And what you amplify with your attention, your biology is instructed to produce more of. Look closer. Here is what the science of telomeres reveals about this. Telomeres are the protective caps at the end of your chromosomes, the biological equivalent of the plastic tips at the end of shoelaces. Every time a cell divides, the telomeres shorten slightly. When they shorten past a critical point, the cell can no longer divide and either becomes dormant or dies. For decades, telomere shortening was considered the primary mechanism of biological aging, an inevitable, irreversible process. Then Elizabeth Blackburn discovered telomerase. She won the Nobel Prize for it in 2009. Telomerase is an enzyme that rebuilds telomeres, that adds length back to the protective caps. That reverses, at the cellular level, the primary mechanism of aging. And it is not a drug. It is not an external intervention. It is produced by your own cells in response to signals they receive from your internal environment. The signals that suppress telomerase production, chronic stress, chronic inflammation, the biochemical signature of sustained threat response, the neurochemical pattern that your body produces when it believes it is in danger or when it believes it is declining, which to the nervous system registers as the same thing. The signals that activate telomerase production, states of safety, states of connection, states of what researchers describe as psychological coherence, the condition in which the story your mind is telling matches the reality your body is experiencing. And, documented in Blackburn's own research, states of mindful observation, states in which the consciousness inhabiting the body is watching without judgment, without the confirmation loop, without the narrative of decline. In other words, the act of observing your body clearly, not optimistically, not with forced positivity, but with genuine, non-judgmental, direct attention, activates the enzyme that rebuilds the cellular architecture of youth. That's not belief. That's biochemistry. That's the Nobel Prize. Now watch what happens when you let that land. Your body has been waiting for you to look at it differently, not to fix it, not to optimize it, to see it, to bring to it the quality of observation that recognizes what is actually there, the regenerative intelligence, the constant renewal, the extraordinary aliveness, rather than the quality of observation that confirms what you've been told to expect. And the book that finds you when you're ready is the instrument that teaches you how to look. Let me show you another layer of this, because we've been talking about the body as if it is separate from the consciousness that observes it. And that separation, the very assumption that there is a you looking at a body that is other than you, is one of the core mechanisms of the aging loop. Watch this carefully. When you say "my body," you are already at a distance. You are positioning yourself as the owner of an object. And objects, unlike subjects, are passive. They receive what is done to them. They don't participate in their own transformation. When you relate to your body as "my body," as a possession, a vehicle, a thing you are in, you are already outside of it, already observing it from a position of separation, already treating it as something that happens to you rather than something that is you. And that separation is not neutral. It generates a specific biochemical environment, the stress of self-objectification, the chronic low-level threat response of feeling housed in something unreliable, the inflammation of being at war with your own flesh. But look closer. Who is observing? When you watch your hands, as you did a moment ago, who is doing the watching? When you notice the ache in your knee or the tiredness behind your eyes, who is noticing? There is a witness in you that is not the body and not the story about the body, a quality of pure awareness that has been present since your first memory and will be present in your last. That witness has not aged, has not declined, has not accumulated the damage that the body accumulates. The witness is as clear and present and immediate as it was when you were 5 years old. More clear, perhaps, more precise, more capable of seeing what is actually there. That witness, that observer, is the most powerful position in your own biology, not because it controls the body, because it sees the body clearly. And what it sees clearly, it changes, not through force, through the quality of its attention, through the signal it sends to the 330 billion cells that are listening. When the witness observes the body with clarity, with genuine, non-judgmental, direct attention, the body receives that clarity as signal, as instruction, as permission to express its full regenerative potential, rather than the diminished potential that fear and story and the confirmation loop of decline have been authorizing. This is the quantum observer effect applied to the most intimate system you inhabit. You are the observer. Your body is the quantum field, and the quality of your observation determines which of its possible states collapse into actuality. Now let me go deeper into the book itself, because the book that finds you when your body is ready is not a single text. It is a category of knowing, a convergence of insights that have been arriving from multiple directions to the same understanding. And that understanding can be described in a single sentence, though the sentence takes a lifetime to fully inhabit. The body ages at the rate the observer believes it should. Not wants it to, believes, not consciously, necessarily. At the level of the observation itself, at the level of what the consciousness sees when it looks at the body without the filters of hope or fear, just the raw, unmediated observation of what it expects to find. And the book, whether it comes to you as a text, as an experience, as a conversation, as a moment of sudden seeing, teaches you to change the expectation, not by replacing it with a better one, but by dissolving it in the acid of direct observation. By looking so clearly at what is actually there that the story cannot survive the looking. This is the practice. This is the only practice that matters, and it is not difficult. It is simply unfamiliar. Because you have been trained your entire life to see the body through the lens of story, the story of your genetics, your family history, your cultural inheritance, your personal narrative of who you are and what you're capable of. And the practice is simply to take off the lens, to look without it, to see what is actually there when you remove the interpretation. Let me give you the second observer practice, because this one goes somewhere specific. Pause here. Find a mirror if you can, or simply close your eyes and hold an image of your own face in your mind. And look. Not at the evidence of time, not at what has changed from what you remember. Look at what is actually there. Notice the aliveness in the eyes, not the age around them, the aliveness in them. The fact that they are seeing right now, that the extraordinary biological machinery of vision is operating, that photons are being converted to electrical signals, that meaning is being made from light. That is happening right now in this moment in your body. Notice the breath, not whether it is deep or shallow or whether you're breathing correctly. The fact of it, the extraordinary, automatic, constant exchange, oxygen in, carbon dioxide out, the lungs expanding and contracting approximately 20,000 times per day without a single conscious instruction from you. Your body doing that right now. While you watch, notice the skin, not its texture or its condition. The fact that it exists at all, that it is the largest organ in your body, that it is constantly regenerating, that it is the boundary between you and the world and also the place where you meet the world, and that it is doing all of this without your management, without your oversight, without your story about how it should look. Now, and this is the practice, let yourself feel what it is like to be inside this, not to look at it from outside, to be it, to drop the distance of my body and inhabit the direct experience of being a body, the warmth, the weight, the constant, complex, miraculous aliveness. Notice what shifts when you do that. Notice the quality of the silence. Notice whether something in you relaxes that you didn't know was tense. Notice whether the story of decline has a little less grip when you are this close to the direct experience of being alive. That shift is not nothing, that is a different signal being sent to your cells. That is telomerase being activated. That is the confirmation loop being interrupted. That is the beginning of the body receiving permission to express a different range of its possible states. You don't need to do this for hours. You need to do it with genuine quality. 3 minutes of this kind of direct, embodied, story-free observation sends a different signal than 3 hours of confirmed decline narrative. Frequency matters less than quality, and quality means no story, just seeing. Now let's go to the layer underneath the biology. Because we've been talking about the body as if it ages in isolation, as if the cells receive signals only from the consciousness that directly inhabits them. But that is not the complete picture. You are not just an individual observer, you are embedded in a field of collective observation. And that field, the cultural, familial, social consensus about what aging means and how it happens, is sending signals to your biology as constantly and powerfully as your own internal observation. Think about what you have witnessed in your lifetime about aging, the people who aged around you, the way your culture portrays the aging body, the stories you absorbed before you had the capacity to question them about what getting older means. The images, the language, the unspoken agreements about what is lost and what is possible. All of that is observation. All of it has been sending signal, and your biology has been listening to all of it. Not just to what you consciously believe, but to the entire field of cultural expectation that surrounds you. This is why the book that finds you when your body is ready is not just a personal intervention. It is a field interruption. It pulls you out of the collective observation long enough to let you see what is actually there beneath the cultural story, beneath the family inheritance, beneath the consensus reality about aging that you have been swimming in so long you forgot it was water. And what is actually there beneath all of that is something the cultural story cannot accommodate. Genuine, documented, reproducible evidence that the aging process is far more malleable than any consensus reality has been willing to admit. Let me give you some of that evidence, not as reassurance, as observation, as the specific data that the confirmation loop of cultural aging has been filtering out. In 2013, researchers at Harvard Medical School demonstrated that they could reverse aging in mice by restoring levels of a compound called NAD+, a molecule that declines with age and that is central to the function of sirtuins, the proteins that regulate cellular aging. The mice, which had the equivalent of human cardiovascular aging, showed measurable reversal of age-related decline within weeks of treatment, not slowing. Reversal in 2020, a clinical trial published in Aging Cell demonstrated that a combination of interventions, dietary changes, sleep optimization, exercise, and specific supplementation produced an average biological age reversal of 3.23 years in 8 weeks. Not theoretical, measured. By DNA methylation analysis, the most precise available tool for assessing biological age. In 2021, researchers at the Salk Institute demonstrated partial cellular reprogramming, the ability to reset the epigenetic markers of aging in living cells without losing their specialized function. In other words, the ability to tell a cell to return to an earlier state of expression to express the genes of youth rather than the genes of decline, without erasing what the cell has learned. And in study after study in the growing field of psychoneuroimmunology, the science of how consciousness affects immune function and cellular health, the most consistent predictor of biological aging is not genetics, not diet, not exercise, but what researchers call psychological coherence. The degree to which the story the mind tells matches the direct experience of the body. The degree to which the observer is seeing clearly rather than confirming a narrative. In other words, the most powerful anti-aging intervention available to you is not in a laboratory. It is in the quality of your observation. Look closer. Here is what that means practically. Because we've been in the territory of principle and science, and the book that finds you when your body is ready doesn't leave you there. It brings you back to the specific, the embodied, the actionable. The practice of reversing biological age through observation is not complicated. It is not time-consuming. It does not require you to abandon your life or overhaul your routines or believe things you don't believe. It requires 3 things and only 3 things. The first is this: stop confirming the story. Every time you look at your body and see evidence of decline, you are not seeing the truth. You are seeing the part of the truth that your confirmation bias has selected. The body is simultaneously declining in some ways and regenerating in others. The confirmation loop only shows you the decline. The practice is to look at both. Not to pretend the decline isn't there, to also see the regeneration, the new skin, the repaired tissue, the constantly renewing cellular architecture, the aliveness that is happening right now in this moment, regardless of what else is also true. The second thing is this: inhabit rather than observe. The distance of my body, the position of looking at the body from outside it, generates a stress response that suppresses regeneration. The practice is to regularly, deliberately drop back into direct embodied experience. Not through meditation necessarily, though that can help. Through any practice that brings you into direct contact with the sensation of being alive. Movement, touch, breath. The simple act of feeling your feet on the floor and recognizing that you are not in your body. You are your body. The third thing is this: update your expectation, not by replacing a negative belief with a positive one. By looking at the evidence, the actual evidence, the documented, measurable, reproducible evidence that biological age is not fixed, that the body can reverse markers of aging at any stage, that the observer effect on cellular biology is real, documented, and available to anyone willing to change the quality of their observation. Let that evidence land not as information, but as permission. Permission to expect something different from your biology. Permission to send a different signal. Because here is what no one tells you about expectation. It is not a thought. It is a biological instruction. When you genuinely expect the body to regenerate, not hope for it, not wish for it, but expect it with the same matter-of-fact certainty with which you expect the sun to rise, the cells receive that expectation as a signal, as permission, as instruction to express the genes of renewal rather than the genes of decline. And that expectation is not something you manufacture, it is something you arrive at through clear seeing, through looking at the evidence and letting it change what you believe is possible, through the act of genuine observation that the book, whatever form it arrives in for you, catalyzes. Let me show you one more layer of this. Because there is something underneath the biology and the quantum mechanics and the epigenetics that we haven't named yet. Something that the book that finds you when your body is ready is ultimately pointing at. Something that, when you see it clearly, changes everything else. The body ages in the direction of the identity that inhabits it. Not the identity you perform, not the identity you aspire to, the identity you actually hold, the deep, unexamined, pre-verbal conviction about who and what you are. The answer to the question that runs beneath every thought and every observation: what kind of being am I, and what is possible for a being like me? For most people, that identity has been shaped by a single, pervasive, unquestioned assumption. I am a biological organism on a fixed timeline, and time moves in one direction, and what has been lost cannot be recovered. That assumption is not a truth. It is an identity, and identities, unlike truths, can be dissolved through direct observation. Watch this. Watch yourself right now. Notice the part of you that, even as you've been listening to everything we've explored together, has been quietly maintaining a skepticism. A part that says, yes, but I'm different. Yes, but the research doesn't apply to me. Yes, but it's too late, or too complicated, or too good to be true. That voice is not your wisdom. That voice is your identity defending itself. Because identities, even painful ones, even limiting ones, have a survival instinct They defend their coherence against information that would dissolve them. And the information that biological age is reversible is existentially threatening to an identity built on the assumption that it isn't. Look at that voice directly. Don't argue with it. Don't try to silence it. Just watch it. Notice how it operates. Notice the specific arguments it makes. Notice how it selects certain pieces of evidence and ignores others. Notice how it feels, the quality of the sensation in your body when that voice is speaking. Because here is what happens when you watch the identity defending itself. It loses its invisibility. And what loses its invisibility loses its automatic authority. You can no longer be run by what you can see clearly. You can no longer be controlled by what you are watching. The identity that says I am on a fixed biological timeline can only control your biology when it is invisible, when it is the water you swim in rather than the thing you observe. The moment you see it, the moment you watch it defending itself, watch it selecting evidence, watch it maintaining its own coherence, it loses its grip. Not all at once, not dramatically, but measurably, verifiably. In the same way that every other thing we've been watching together tonight has lost its grip the moment you looked at it directly. This is the deepest layer of what the book reveals. Not a new belief about the body, not a better story about aging. The dissolution through direct observation of the identity that has been running your biology. The revelation that who you actually are, the observer, the witness, the quality of awareness that has been watching all of this, is not on any timeline at all. The observer doesn't age, the observer watches aging, and the moment you recognize yourself as the observer, rather than the thing being observed, the thing being observed, the body, receives a fundamentally different signal. The signal that it is not a machine running down, that it is a quantum field in the hands of a consciousness that has just recognized its own power. And that signal, that recognition, is the most potent biological intervention available to any human being. Let me give you the third and final observer practice. This one goes to the deepest level. Close your eyes if you can, or soften your gaze so that the visual field becomes less dominant. Bring your attention to the fact that you are aware, not to what you are aware of, to the awareness itself. The simple, irreducible fact that there is something it is like to be you right now. That experience is happening. That consciousness is present. Now notice that awareness has no age. You can remember being 5, being 15, being 25, and in each of those memories, the awareness is the same. The contents are different, the story is different, the body is different, but the awareness, the pure fact of being conscious is identical. It has not aged, it cannot age, it is not in time the way the body is in time. You are that, not primarily the body, primarily the awareness that inhabits the body, the observer that watches the body, the consciousness that sends the signal. And from that position, the position of the observer who is not on a timeline, look at the body again, not from outside it, from the position of the awareness that is prior to it, that is not subject to its timeline, that is not bound by the story of its decline. From that position, what do you see? Not what you think you should see. What you actually see when you look from the place that is not aging at the body that has been told it is. Notice what shifts. Notice whether something in the body relaxes that has been held for a very long time. Notice whether the ache is still there, but its meaning has changed. Notice whether the face in your mind's eye looks different when it is seen by eyes that are not afraid of time. That shift is not a trick. That is not positive thinking or wishful seeing. That is the quantum observer effect in action. The observer changing what it observes simply by changing the quality of its observation. The consciousness sending a different signal to the 330 billion cells that are listening. Stay with it for as long as you need. Now let's talk about you specifically, because everything we've explored together, the quantum mechanics, the epigenetics, the telomeres, the Ellen Langer experiment, Marin in the library, the confirmation loop, the identity that defends itself. All of it has been pointing at something specific in your life now. Something you already know about, something you have been carrying in your body as a story about what is possible for you. You know what it is. Might be the energy you remember having and have accepted as gone. The clarity of mind that you've attributed to age rather than to the quality of your observation. The physical capacity you've been treating as a fixed ceiling rather than a malleable range. The face you've been watching for evidence of loss rather than evidence of life. The body you've been at war with or resigned to or managing rather than inhabiting. Whatever it is, that specific thing, I want you to look at it now with everything we've built together. Not to fix it, not to force it to change. To see it clearly, possibly for the first time. See the story you've been telling about it. See the confirmation loop that had been running. See the identity that has been defended by maintaining the story. See the quality of observation you've been bringing to it. The faithful, devoted, meticulous observation of decline that has been sending a very specific instruction to your cells. And now, watch what happens when you bring a different quality of observation to it. Not a better story, a clearer seeing. The seeing that recognizes both what is declining and what is regenerating. The seeing that witnesses without confirming. The seeing that comes from the observer who is not on a timeline, looking at a body that has been told it is. What do you notice? Not what you think you should notice, what you actually notice. In your body, in the quality of the sensation around that specific thing you've been carrying. Is there a shift, a softening, a quality of permission that wasn't there before? That is your biology responding. That is the signal changing. That is the beginning of a different instruction being sent to the cells that are listening. It doesn't resolve in a moment. The confirmation loop has been running for years, and it will take consistent quality observation to interrupt it fully. But the interruption has already begun. The moment you saw the loop clearly, the moment you watched it operating, watched it selecting evidence, watched it maintaining its own coherence, it lost some of its automatic authority. And that is how it works. Not through force, through seeing, through the unflinching, compassionate, quantum-precise act of looking at what has been running your biology and watching it transform in the light of your awareness. Because what you observe, you change. What you avoid observing controls you, and you have been avoiding this, not because you couldn't handle it, but because seeing it clearly would make it impossible to keep living the way you've been living. And you were not ready until now. The book found you, not because you were looking for it, because your body was ready. Because something in the cellular architecture of who you are had already begun to ask the question that the book answers. already begun to reach for a different quality of observation, already begun to listen for a signal that wasn't the confirmation loop. And here you are. Now here's something I want you to sit with before we go to the final layer, because there is one more thing the book reveals that we haven't named yet. Something that might be the most important thing. Something that the quantum mechanics and the epigenetics and the telomeres and the observer practices have all been building toward. The reversal of biological age is not the goal. Look at that directly. Because if you've been listening to everything we've explored tonight and thinking, yes, I want to reverse my age, I want to look younger, I want to feel younger, I want to get back what I've lost, that wanting is itself part of the confirmation loop. That wanting says what I am now is not enough, what I have now is a loss. The present moment of my body is a problem to be solved, and that is the signal that accelerates aging. The signal of insufficiency, the signal that the present moment of the body is wrong. The reversal of biological age is not the goal. The goal, the only goal that actually produces the reversal, is clear seeing. Genuine, direct, story-free observation of what is actually there. The recognition of the extraordinary aliveness that is happening right now, in this body, in this moment, regardless of what else is also true. The inhabiting of the observer position, not to fix the body, but to see it, not to change it, but to witness it with the quality of attention that recognizes its full range of possibility. When you do that, when you bring that quality of observation to the body consistently, genuinely, without agenda, the reversal is a natural consequence, not a goal achieved through effort, a result that emerges from clarity. Because the body is not a machine that needs to be optimized. It is a quantum field that needs to be seen clearly. And when it is seen clearly, when the observer stops confirming decline and starts witnessing the full spectrum of what is actually there, it collapses into a different range of possible states. Not because you forced it, because you saw it. This is the deepest teaching of the book that finds you when your body is ready. Not a protocol, not a belief system, not a set of practices to follow. A different quality of relationship with the body. A relationship not of ownership or management or optimization, but of genuine, attentive, compassionate observation. The relationship of the quantum observer to the quantum field. The relationship of the witness to the witnessed. The relationship that, at the cellular level, activates telomerase, reduces inflammation, changes gene expression, and produces the measurable, documented, reproducible reversal of biological age. Not as a side effect, as the direct result of the only thing that has ever actually changed anything, seeing it clearly. Look closer. You've been watching this whole time. You've been the observer through every layer of this transmission. And something in you's been shifting, not because you've been trying to shift it, but because you've been watching. Because the quality of attention you've brought to this, the willingness to look at the confirmation loop, to see the identity defending itself, to inhabit the observer position rather than the observed position, has been sending a different signal to your biology with every moment of genuine seeing. That signal is cumulative. It doesn't reset when you stop watching, it builds. Each moment of clear observation adds to the field of instruction your cells are receiving. Each time you interrupt the confirmation loop with genuine seeing, the loop loses a little more of its automaticity. Each time you inhabit the observer position, the awareness that is not on a timeline, the body receives a little more permission to express its full regenerative range. This is not a one-time event. This is a practice, the practice of a lifetime. But it's not a difficult practice. It is the simplest practice imaginable. Look clearly. Look without the story. Look with the quality of attention that recognizes what is actually there, beneath the narrative of decline, beneath the confirmation loop, beneath the identity that has been defending its own coherence. Look at the extraordinary, improbable, constantly regenerating miracle of the body you inhabit. And watch what happens. Before we close, I want to give you something to carry. Not a belief, not an affirmation, an observation. A specific, precise, scientifically grounded observation that you can return to whenever the confirmation loop reasserts itself. Whenever the identity defending itself gets loud. Whenever you catch yourself watching your own decline with the faithful devotion of someone who has been told that's what wisdom looks like. Here it is. Sit with it. Right now, in this moment, your body is producing new cells, approximately 3.8 million of them per second, each one receiving the signal of your current state of observation. Each one taking its instructions from the biochemistry of your internal environment, which is shaped by the quality of your attention, which is determined by what you are choosing to see. Right now, in this moment, your telomeres are either shortening or being rebuilt, depending on whether your nervous system is receiving a signal of threat or a signal of safety. And the most powerful determinant of that signal is not what is happening to you, but how you are observing what is happening to you. Right now, in this moment, your genes are expressing, not in a fixed, predetermined way, dynamically, responsively, in response to the epigenetic signals generated by your internal state. And your internal state is, at this moment, different from what it was when you began this transmission. Because you have been watching, because you have been seeing, because the quality of your observation has shifted, even slightly, in the direction of clarity. And that shift, that small, precise, genuine shift in the quality of your observation, is being received right now by 3.8 million new cells per second as instruction, as permission, as the beginning of a different story being written not in words, but in cellular biology. That is not a metaphor. That is the mechanism. That is the quantum observer effect in action in your own body, in this moment, as you listen. You were never meant to look away, not from the body, not from the aging, not from the confirmation loop or the identity defending itself or the story that has been running your biology. You were meant to look at all of it, clearly, directly, without flinching, without the filters of hope or fear or the need to arrive at a particular conclusion. You were meant to be the observer, the witness, the consciousness that sees what is actually there and in seeing it, changes it. Not because seeing is a magical act, because seeing is a quantum act, because the observer and the observed are not separate, because the quality of your attention is the most powerful biological signal available to you. Because what you watch, you change, and what you avoid watching controls you. The book found you, not when you were looking for it, when your body was ready, when something in the cellular architecture of who you are had already begun to ask the question, already begun to reach for a different quality of observation, already begun to listen for a signal that wasn't the confirmation loop. And here you are, having looked, having seen, having watched the confirmation loop and the identity defending itself, and the quantum mechanics of your own biology, and the extraordinary, improbable, constantly regenerating miracle of the body you inhabit. Here you are, on the other side of looking. And what has been seen cannot be unseen. The observer is the most powerful position in the universe, not because it controls, because it sees clearly. And clarity, genuine, direct, story-free clarity, is the only force that transforms without resistance, the only intervention that works at the level of the instruction itself, rather than at the level of the symptom. You don't need to fix your body, you need to see it clearly, consistently, with the quality of attention that recognizes the full spectrum of what is actually there, the decline and the regeneration, the aging and the constant renewal, the story that has been running and the extraordinary aliveness that has been running beneath it all along. Do that genuinely, consistently, without agenda, and watch what happens. Now I want to hear from you, because the field of observers that gathers around this kind of seeing is not passive, it amplifies. When you name what you saw, when you bring into language the specific thing you looked at clearly for the first time tonight, you anchor it. You make it real in a different way. You send a signal not just to your own cells, but to the field of everyone watching this who needs to know that they are not alone in the looking. So tell me, what illusion about your body fell apart tonight the moment you looked at it directly? What part of the confirmation loop did you finally see clearly enough that it lost its grip? Drop it in the comments. One word or everything you've been carrying. The field is listening, and what you name you can no longer be run by. If something in this transmission landed for you, share it with someone who needs the courage to look at what they've been avoiding. Not to convince them of anything, but because one person's genuine seeing creates permission for the people around them to see more clearly too. That is not a small thing. That is how the field of collective observation shifts. You sharing this is an act of clarity, extending outward, and both of you will see more because of it. And if you want to stay in this field, if you want to keep developing the quality of observation that changes biology, that interrupts the confirmation loop, that activates the regenerative intelligence of the body you inhabit, stay close. There is more to see. There is always more to see. Because the quantum field of your own biology is not a finite thing with a fixed number of layers. It is infinite. And every layer of clear seeing reveals another layer waiting to be seen. The observer never runs out of things to observe. The witness never exhausts the field of the witnessed. And the body, your body, right now in this moment, never stops having the capacity to surprise you with what it can do when it is seen clearly. You are never meant to look away. Now you see. And what has been seen cannot be unseen. What you watch, you change. What you avoid controls you. The observer is the most powerful position in the universe, and you have been the observer all along. You just needed to see it clearly. Stay in the clarity. Keep watching. And watch what happens. There is a direct continuation of what you just experienced waiting for you in the video about what happens when the quantum field only responds once you stop trying to control it. Because the same quality of observation you brought to your body tonight is the exact mechanism by which the field around you reorganizes. Watch that next.